This case is called Acid Rains, and it's an example of a case coming in and starting with one thing that seems kind of simple, and then turns into just an entirely different case and becomes very dangerous. My client Richard came to me because he had a Rolls Royce collection, an antique Rolls Royce. He had a 1908 Silver Cloud, I believe, Rolls Royce. A couple of them. He had a 1926 Rolls Royce, a couple of stretch limos, but the Rolls Royce collection was worth a lot of money. And he explained that the paint was bubbling on his car, and when he turned his headlights on, the windshield wipers would go on. And he'd turn the windshield wipers and the parking lights would go on. And it was an electrical mess. And plus this paint was bubbling up. And he had gone back to the dealer who had painted them, and they had agreed to repaint them. And then it happened again, and he got them to repaint it again. And I believe the third time that he went back to them, they refused to paint the cars. So he hired me to find out what was going on. He thought it was something much deeper than just an auto electrical problem. So I took a couple of investigators out and started checking the cars. We took the bubbled paint and took samples off of it, took it to some labs, and had an electrician check his wiring. And after a few days getting the reports back, they all came in and told me that there was something that was affecting the wiring that had been done to the car. They almost thought that someone poured acid into the engine or something that corroded the wiring, and it all started short-circuiting. And this, whatever was doing that, was the same chemicals that was bubbling the paint on his car. So we looked around, we went to the neighbors, we started doing canvassing. I brought about 5 or 6 agents out and knocking on doors and talking to people, asking other people if they had had the same problem with their automobiles or anything. And it started to really turn. We went to a couple of neighbors. My guys are reporting back to me, the agents, guys and girls, and they are saying, yeah, it's happening in this entire neighborhood here. There are other cars that the paint is bubbling and peeling. Not so much the electrical problems in the cars, but that their swimming pool had oil on it, a film of oil, almost like there had been an eruption of some gasoline, petroleum place. And the oil was on the water, and the fruit, the oranges and the apples and stuff. And this is in a town where they grew a lot. The orange trees and apple trees and pears. And they were only growing about 1/3 their normal size and literally falling off of the tree. And these little oranges and apples, and I mean, they were, like this instead of a normal apple. And they were falling off, and after about a week, we discovered that there was a crib death in the area, and another almost crib death where the baby had to go to the hospital and had all kinds of lung problems. But the first baby that died, they thought that it was SID, sudden infant death. And this happened to a friend of mine. We had cases of it. And there is something that affects children, very few, but they literally can die in their sleep while they're in their crib. So checking all of this, and then we had doctors and scientists, and we're trying to figure all of this out. And it started to make a picture. We got maps of the entire city and marked off the areas that my client lived in and that this was happening in. And it seemed to, when we looked at the map, the majority of the problems with the pools, the pears, the apples, whatever, and cars was in a line that almost went through this city a couple of blocks wide and went through for a couple of miles. And we really all would have to sit in the war room and go over this and try to figure out. And then one of the scientists said, that was getting the compounds for us, that was in everything, said that he believed it had to be coming from the air, literally coming down on these houses and the swimming pools and stuff. So I looked at the companies that might have those chemicals in that city, and we backed up from the neighborhood. And so I found a fertilizer company that was there. I found a oil refinery, a major oil, one of the most successful oil companies in the world, one of their refineries, and then the closest one to the neighborhood was a trucking company. And all of these trucks were round, they were chemical trucks, they were carrying chemicals and stuff. And so we did surveillance, and we would watch this after hours to see if anything was going on after hours, and had some people looking at it at the daytime, trying to figure out who was going in and out and what they were doing. And the trucking company had these steam rooms, washing areas. The trucks would come in and I load in this place, and they would get, I don't think they loaded, it was a clean, they would basically clean the trucks, and they may have put some chemicals in them, and we couldn't tell. We're doing surveillance, and it's difficult because you're looking through binoculars, you're standing across the street, you know, some guy's selling newspapers, it's one of my agents, and we're just trying to watch everything. And so we noticed that in the evening time, when these trucks came in, they would immediately put it in the wash area, and these guys in hazmat suits would come out. And I mean, a complete hazmat suit. And they would spray these trucks down with these power washers, with steaming water. And so we looked at that, and the fertilizer, and the oil company, and then as we're doing a bigger surveillance, this case was just getting huge, and I mean dozens of agents. And we're watching, and the mobile, or the refinery company, would release, there's always white smoke coming out of the smokestacks. You'll notice around any refinery. And they would, whenever it would rain or get cloudy and like it was going to rain, we noticed that the smokestacks was releasing various color of gray, and they would just change colors. And they seemed to only do this when it was raining or when it was really cloudy and damp outside. And so literally the scientists said, okay, we need to get the chemicals, the exact compound that's coming out of the factories. We know what's in the yards and on the fruit trees and in the pools. We got to find out what these factories are releasing, the exact chemicals. So I had some guys that managed to go into these establishments when they were closed and get pieces of metal and just items that were around. Some guys, the hazmat guys, wore boots, but they had booties on the boots, the same as they did in the oil refinery. So we grabbed a couple of the booties. We just grabbed different stuff. Booties meaning foot. You put them over your shoe. And so we grabbed stuff from these 3 different factories and gave it to the scientists. And they came back and they said, well, this chemical from this factory would not independently do this damage. This chemical from this one would not do the damage independently, nor would the third one. But if you put them all together, and they gave us the technical terms, STH, H2O, they gave us the terms, but if you put all 3 of the chemicals together and mixed it with water, H2O, it became H2SO4, which is sulfuric acid. Now this is 1970s. And so I then rented a helicopter and went up and looked at the line of these factories and the homes. All of it literally was like a football field right through this town, and right where these 3 factories, almost exactly in line. And so when we used the helicopter, we also got the wind currents and weather charts and everything, and we could see that the wind, when it was going to rain or it was really damp, the wind would blow in the identical direction down the identical streets that we were looking at. So the bottom line, it came down to this factory, this cleaning plant, whatever these guys were using hazmat suits for, to wash off these trucks, these chemical trucks that were carrying chemicals. It had to be something pretty bad. I mean, they're all protecting themselves like crazy. So those 3, the wind would blow, the weather would get cloudy, it's going to rain, and now the wind starts up, and the wind brings this chemical, and it mixes it with this chemical, then it mixes it with this chemical, and all of that is mixed with H2O, and it rained. When it rained, they always did this during then, when it rained sulfuric acid. This is where the name acid rains came from. To my knowledge, there was no other case prior to this that there was acid rains. And so we realized what was going on, and we told the client that, what was going on. While this is happening, one night, and we're trying to figure out what he should do, and we've got to get everything together before he can sue them. And now the neighbors that we are talking to are going to the refinery company, and they're having their cars repainted, which the refinery company is doing. There was a car lot, a new car, big car lot. It had probably 300 cars that they sold all the time. And the car company had the same problem with their cars, because we're going around asking everybody, knocking on doors. Now everybody's realizing that what is happening, it all has something to do with the neighborhood. So the car company goes to the refinery and makes them pay for 300 cars that were ruined. The paint was ruined. And they do that. It happened again. This is taking weeks. This is a huge investigation with scientists and everything. And you've got to do all of this before anybody files a lawsuit. So we're getting all of this together. And I get a phone call. I'm at home one night. I lived in the valley. I lived in these apartments. And I get a call, and this guy comes on, and he says, would you mind handing me that book, The Jewish Gangster there? I get a call from this guy, real deep voice. You can pretty much tell he's a big guy. And he knows my name. He says, Logan, my name's Mike. And he said, listen, you need to tell your client to back off of what he is doing with the neighborhood and the Rolls Royce cars and all the bullshit. It needs to knock off, and it needs to knock off right now. And I said, oh, really? I said, well, and what's going to happen if it doesn't knock off right now? He said, I will kill your client. I said, okay. I said, well, first you're going to have to kill me. And he said, do you think I would be calling you if I didn't already know who you were and your entire background and your reputation? He said, I know what car you drive. I know who your parents are. I know everything about you. That gets your attention. I get a lot of calls. I get threatened so much by people that I would just, if someone would threaten me, I would always say the line forms at the left. So it doesn't really, I don't really get affected by it that much. I listen, and not because I'm super brave or I'm super tough. It's just that a lot of people threaten guys like me, and they, they're going to do a whole bunch of things. Rarely do they ever do it. They do it though. It does happen. So this conversation goes back and forth, and it's pretty foul, and actually parts of it are funny. I mean, this guy really does know a lot about me, and he said, I'm not some punk from the valley here, which is where I live. I'm not some punk from the valley or one of these Hollywood idiots. I'm from New York, from the Bronx, and we do things differently there. Okay. And so he just kept saying that he was going to kill my client if my client did not stop. So we ended the conversation just kind of yelling at each other. We ended the conversation kind of yelling at each other. And I hung up, and I called a couple of my agents, and I started talking to them about the phone call I had just gotten. And about 30 minutes later, the phone rang again, and it was this guy, Mike. And he started in again, and he said, look, I think you're a really reasonable guy. I think all you got to do is just, he said, I know that you're owed X amount of dollars, thousands of dollars on the case because it's been going on so long. And I said, no, I'm getting paid. I'm fine, but there's a bill, yeah. And he said, well, I'll pay you for the bill that your client owes, and I'll pay you some more money. Just walk away from this case. He said, I do not want to tangle with you. I just want your client to stop what he's doing. And I kept asking him, who do you work for? And I knew he wasn't going to tell me. So I convinced him, I kept him on the phone and kept talking to him. I convinced him to meet me at the Sportsman's Lodge on Ventura Boulevard in the Valley. And I said, look, let's, meet, let's talk, let's go over this. So Mike, I get his full name. I said, you know all about me. Why don't you give me your full name? And this is a weird call because, normally you get a threatening call and they say, I'm going to kill you, or if you don't stop what you're doing, I'm going to kill you, and they hang up. They don't say, this is George Jones, I'm going to go and kill you. This guy did. This guy sounded incredibly confident, incredibly good at his job. it didn't sound like anything bothered him. This book, The Last Jewish Gangster, is about the man who called me. And Nick Pileggi, you can look this name up. Nick Pileggi wrote Wise Guy. He wrote Casino. He wrote Goodfellas, probably one of the greatest gangster movies ever done. And he wrote Casino. So you can look those movies up. He wrote the foreword to this book. This guy has spent his life knowing about gangsters and mafia. And it says, I've known Michael Hardy for nearly 40 years. And when it comes to gangsters, he's the real thing. And this book about his life is one of the most fascinating stories you can imagine. After reading The Last Jewish Gangster, I'm telling you that Mike's voice comes alive on these pages, and his story makes for a very captivating and different kind of true crime book. So this guy was about as real as it can get. The author of this book signed it to me when he sent it to me, and it's Michael's dead now. It says in here, he wrote on it, Logan, never safe, but never afraid. Michael's motto, and I'm probably not very far from yours. So this guy was definitely the real deal. Anyway, so I called my guys and I told them that what was happening. We're going to meet at the Sportsman's Lodge. And I had 3 of my guys. I had 2 of them sitting at the bar and 1 sitting over at a table. There might have been one of their agents there. I'm pretty sure there was 3. I know there I had at least 2 at the bar and 1 at the table. I think I put a woman also in there alone. But anyway, so I'm sitting in the Sportsman's Lodge, and we were going to meet, I think, at like 7 o'clock or something. So we go in, and I have my 2 agents sitting up at the bar, and the other agent at a table. And I'm sitting at the back table so I can see everything that's going on in the entire bar. And I can see the only entrance. And in the Sportsman's Lodge, which is still there on Ventura Boulevard, as you go in, the bar, the lobby bar, has a Spanish archway. And you walk into the bar. There's no doors or anything. You walk into the bar through this Spanish archway. So I told the guys, I said, they know what to do. They've been with me a long time. And I said, just, make sure this thing doesn't, go sideways and turn into a shit show. So I'm sitting there, my guys are at the bar, and I was listening to the piano player, and I think I might have said something to him. Had a drink, and I'm saying something to the piano player, and all of a sudden a shadow came over the entire room. Now that's the only door, is this Spanish door, oval kind of top door. And the entire room got dark. Not pitch black, but it just got dark. Somebody blocked the sun. So I turned around and I looked at the entrance, and there was a guy standing there that was so large, he had the tattoo of an eagle on his bicep with the wings fully spread. This guy weighed 290, 300 pounds, solid muscle, just huge man, and forearms the size of my thighs. So he walks into the bar, and looks around, and he's obviously looking for me. I just went, oh, fuck, here we go. This guy's a little bigger than I thought he was. So he comes in to the bar. He comes walking in, walks right up to me and sits down, and I was sitting with my back to the door so that he would sit right there with his back to the bar. So he sits down, and we go through this whole conversation. It's like a movie script, and he's going through, you know, and he's in the middle of it. He's being nice to me. He's talking to me. I mean, just like a normal conversation. Somebody that had respect for me, and he knew about me. He knew what I'd done. He knew about my work during Vietnam, what I did overseas when I lived in Southeast Asia. During the Vietnam War, and this is hard to say, but I kind of liked him. I mean, he was a straightforward guy, straight shooter, and as I say, you know, very respectful of me, and he kept trying to convince me to just get my client to knock it off, and if nothing else, me walk away from the case. And then they will take care of it. And I have never done that in my entire career. I'm not going to do it now. So I said, no, that's not going to happen. And I noticed that Mike was sitting at the table with both of his arms down. I couldn't see his hands. They were underneath the table on his, I assumed, resting on his knees. And I'm sitting and watching, and I look at him, and he looks me right in the eye, and he said, well, he said, you're either a fool, Logan, or you have more balls than brains. He said, I have a Smith & Wesson pointed at your stomach right now, and all I got to do is pull the trigger. It'll shock everybody so much, and I'll get out that door, and I'll be gone, and nobody will be able to do anything. And I kind of nodded my head. I said, that's very clever. I said, before you do that, why don't you look over at the bar? And I raised my hand and went like that. And my two guys at the bar swung around on their bar stools, and they had coats on, and they put their hands inside their coats like this and looked at Mike. And Mike looked back at him, looked at me, and went, very good. Like touche. And I could see that he put his gun, I could tell by the movements of him that he put his gun back in his pants. And he said, all right, look, he said, obviously we don't want to get into a gun shootout here. And he said, you just need to tell him to knock it off, because I am going to kill him. And he said, if you're not going to tell him to knock it off, you should go protect him, or you should warn him. And he got up, took my drink, the rest of my drink, downed it, and walked out. And walked out of the club. So my guys, we all got together and we talked, and the first thing everybody said was, my God, he's big. Jesus. So we talked about it, what we're going to do and stuff. And I went to a phone and immediately called Richard and told him what was going on. I told him what the guy's name was. And I said, Richard, you need to take your gun to the office tomorrow. Make sure that you take it to the office tomorrow. And he said, well, Logan, maybe I shouldn't show up. I said, no. I said, Mike, this guy's going to find you. No matter what you do, this guy is a professional. He will find you. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And you might as well meet him on your own turf, and you'll be much better. I will get down there tomorrow, and I will be on the premises, and I'll be packing, and I'll have my agents around, so we'll get it taken care of. So the next morning, Richard was late going into the office. He told me not to come first thing in the morning and to wait and see if I could gather more information on this guy. I said, okay. He's probably not going to do it today anyway. But I said, you did bring your gun? He said, yeah, I got my gun. And he had a German Luger, I believe. So he goes to his office. A car, this is right across the street. Desi Arnaz Studios, or the Gower Studios now, is here. And Melrose comes down here, and right across the street on Melrose is Paramount Movie Studios. Huge gate, right? Paramount Movie Studios. So a white car pulls up, white Cadillac, pulls up and parks directly across the street from Gower Studios. And Michael gets out. In the car is his wife and his, I think, 8-month, 10-month-old baby is in the car. He has them wait. He walks into Gower Studios, goes to Mike's office. He had been there before, he knew where it was. Goes to Mike's, and Gower Studio has these, at that time, had these like wood sidewalks, and you could hear people walking down. And he walks down, he goes into to Richard's office and walks past the secretary, sees Richard. There's another guy in the office, I can't remember his name. Richard is there behind his desk, and Michael walks up, pulls out his gun, and smacks him across the head and shoots. Richard flies back, blood comes off of his forehead. He flies back from his chair on the ground, out. Michael looks over, walks up, looks over the desk, has his gun on him. Richard doesn't move, and he looks at the other guy, and he says, if you move or repeat a word about this, I'll come back and kill you. Puts his gun back in, walks outside of Gower Studios. Richard has just been grazed by the bullet. It cracked him with the butt of the gun in the head, split his head open, and the bullet just grazed his forehead. Well, if you've ever seen anybody hit, cut, shot in the forehead, it bleeds like a mother. In a boxing match, it just bleeds down your face. So he looked dead. So Michael walks out, doesn't run, walks, hustles out, and goes across, walks out the gate of Gower Studios, walks across to his car where his wife and baby are waiting. Richard gets up, wakes up, gets up while this is going on, grabs his Luger, runs down, drops into a prone position in front of, now, and everything I'm telling you was in the newspaper. You can look this up. It's part of history, okay? I'm not stupid enough to sit here and tell a story that however many people see this can fact check. So Richard plops down on the floor in a prone position. He's an ex-Marine. In a prone position, Mike Hardy is going, he's opened up his car door. Richard starts shooting. The windows blow out of the car. Mike turns around, tries to use the car door as a shield, and he's shooting at Richard, but Richard's down on the ground. He's shooting at Richard, doesn't hit him, can't hit him. Richard fires, has 5 more shots left, fires, hits him one time here, hits him one time here, hits him one time in the face, which spun him around and then shot him twice in the back. There is blood flowing all over where his car is on Melrose. Michael, this man is huge. He has been shot 5 times by a German Luger. He gets into his car, opens the door, gets into his car, and drives himself to Cedars-Sinai Hospital, which is not that far away from where we were. He pulls up in front of the emergency room where the ambulances pull up, gets out of his car, and says, "I've been shot." Everybody's running towards the car. He says, "I've been shot," and he collapses. They take him into the hospital and miraculously save his life.